couple people, we're just doing what we can do to survive.
It's 14 degrees outside. No heater, no electricity, just a thin layer of nylon between you and hypothermia. So why aren't homeless people freezing to death every single night? What do they know that survival experts won't tell you? Here's something most people don't realize. That fancy double-pane window in your house? Homeless people figured out the same principle using 2 cheap tents. You take a smaller tent, shove it inside a bigger one. Leave 6 to 12 inches of dead air between the walls. That's it. That's the whole trick. And it works ridiculously well. See, wind is a heat thief. It doesn't just make you cold, it actively strips warmth away from anything it touches. But that air gap? Wind can't reach the inner tent. The outer tent takes the beating while you stay protected inside your little insulated bubble. I learned this from a guy named Marcus in Denver. He'd been sleeping outside for 3 winters. No frostbite, no hypothermia scares. Just 2 Goodwill tents, one stuffed inside the other. The temperature difference? 15 to 20 degrees warmer using nothing but body heat. No heater, no electricity, no fire risk. Now here's what makes this even better. You don't need expensive gear. A beat-up family tent from a thrift store costs maybe $20. A cheap single-person tent runs about $10. Together, they outperform $100 winter tents. Don't have 2 tents? A tarp works too. Suspend it 8 inches outside your tent walls, and you'll still get measurable warmth improvement. Not as good as the double tent setup, but definitely noticeable. Winter mountaineers pay $300 for 4-season tents that use this exact principle. The technology isn't complicated. It's just trapped air doing what trapped air does. But here's what most people get wrong. They focus on the walls and completely forget about the ceiling. All that body heat you're generating, it floats straight up and escapes through the roof. Which brings us to a $2 solution that changes everything. Now here's where it gets clever. Most people lose heat through their tent ceiling without even realizing it. Your body radiates warmth upward all night long. And that heat? Gone. Straight through the fabric into the cold sky. But homeless folks figured out something mountaineers pay big money for. Hang a reflective surface from your ceiling, and suddenly that escaping heat bounces right back down onto you. We're talking an extra 10 to 15 degrees just from a $2 emergency blanket. The trick is positioning. Shiny side faces you, always. I learned this the hard way during a camping trip where I had the Mylar backwards for 3 freezing nights. Felt like an idiot when someone pointed it out. Attach it about 2 to 3 inches below the actual tent ceiling. Safety pins work great. Binder clips too, even tape if that's all you've got. The gap matters because air needs to flow between the reflective layer and the tent fabric. And the weird part is, this setup solves another problem nobody talks about. Morning condensation. Your breath creates moisture all night. Without a liner, that moisture collects on the tent ceiling and drips directly onto your sleeping bag. Nothing ruins warmth faster than wet insulation. The reflective barrier catches those drips before they soak your gear. Commercial tent liners exist. They cost $40, $50. But the homemade version using emergency blankets performs almost identically. The companies don't want you knowing that. You don't even need full ceiling coverage. Just cover the area directly above where your head and torso sleep. Maximum benefit from minimal material. Makes sense, right? But reflecting heat back is only half the battle, because the real enemy isn't above you. Here's the thing about cold. It doesn't just come from the air around you. The ground beneath your tent is actively stealing your body heat, and it does this 25 times faster than air does. That's not a typo. Direct contact with frozen earth will drain warmth from your body faster than a teenager drains a refrigerator. So what's the solution when you can't afford a fancy camping pad? Cardboard. Specifically 4 to 6 layers of flattened boxes stacked under your sleeping bag. Those corrugated air channels running through each piece, they provide R2 insulation per inch. That's equivalent to foam camping pads costing $40 to $50. Except cardboard costs exactly nothing. Now here's where it gets interesting. Refrigerator and appliance boxes are the gold standard. Thicker walls, more durable construction. They'll last weeks before needing replacement. Regular shipping boxes work too, but they compress faster. The real trick is arrangement. You want the corrugation running perpendicular between layers. Creates a crosshatch pattern that traps maximum air. One layer runs north-south, next layer runs east-west. Keep alternating. But wait, there's a problem nobody warns you about. Your body releases moisture all night. That moisture soaks into cardboard. Wet cardboard equals zero insulation. Might as well sleep on ice. Fix? Throw a plastic sheet or tarp over your top cardboard layer. Simple barrier that keeps everything dry underneath. A proper setup can raise your sleeping surface temperature by 20 degrees compared to sleeping directly on frozen ground. 20 degrees. That's the difference between uncomfortable and dangerous. A few months ago, I had no idea what a health ring even was until my wife got me one, and I have to say I'm shocked this isn't a widely known and used product. It tracks my stress levels, and what I found out is that some supplements made my stress score spike while others actually helped bring it down. I adjusted a few things based on that, and honestly, I feel 10 years younger. My wife mainly uses it to track her menstrual cycles, and she is obsessed with her sleep quality score. I noticed they are currently running a limited 69% discount, but I don't know how long it will last. It's currently only $60, and it's clear. This one is the best bang for your buck, with other health rings priced around $350 with less functions. They managed to price it this low because they cut out the middleman like Amazon, Walmart, etc., who drive up the price and take a big margin, ending up with the customer paying 3 to 5 times more. If you are on TV, you can check it out yourself by pausing the video and scanning the QR code with your phone camera or clicking the first link in the description of this video. One last tip. Replace the bottom layer weekly as ground moisture slowly degrades it. Move upper layers down, add fresh cardboard on top. Speaking of things that rise, your body heat floats upward constantly, and most of it escapes completely unless you know these next tricks. Your own body is a furnace. Most people just waste the heat. Sleeping in a curled fetal position cuts your exposed surface area by 40%. That's not a small number. You're basically turning yourself into a human ball of warmth instead of a radiator giving away heat to empty air. Now here's a trick that sounds weird but works like magic. Gas stations have hot water in their bathrooms. Fill a bottle, cap it tight, and shove it against your groin before sleeping. Sounds uncomfortable, right? But major arteries run through there. Warm blood flows to your freezing feet within minutes. My grandfather called this the poor man's heating pad. He wasn't wrong. Hand warmers work on the same principle. Tuck them near your wrists, neck, or inner thighs. Anywhere blood vessels run close to the skin. You're not just warming one spot. You're heating your entire circulation system. And then there's the buddy system. 2 people in one tent generate enough combined body heat to raise the temperature 15 degrees. That's why homeless encampments often pair up during cold snaps. It's not just companionship, it's survival math. Dogs are even better. A canine's body temperature runs around 101 degrees. Many homeless individuals keep dogs for exactly this reason. Plus, dogs don't steal the blankets. Usually. But the simplest trick? Exercise vigorously for 5 minutes before climbing into your sleeping bag. Jumping jacks, push-ups, whatever gets your heart pumping. You're preheating your personal cocoon with your own internal engine. Makes sense, right? Here's what most people miss, though. All this body heat goes to waste if it escapes through the wrong places. And that brings us to something critical about where you actually put your tent. Now, here's where most people mess up. They get the insulation right, the cardboard perfect, the reflective ceiling installed. Then they pitch their tent facing the wrong direction and lose half that warmth in seconds. Wind is sneaky like that. Position your tent entrance away from prevailing wind. Seems obvious, right? But I've watched people set up facing directly into gusts because that's where the view was. There's no view at 3 a.m. when you're freezing. Then there's tent selection. 4-season tents with minimal mesh ventilation hold heat like a thermos. Summer tents with all that breathable mesh might as well sleep in a screen door. Thrift stores occasionally have expedition quality tents donated by people who went camping once and hated it. Their loss, your gain. But what if you're stuck with a cheap summer tent? Natural windbreaks become your best friend. Building walls, dumpsters, thick bushes, parking yourself behind a concrete wall can reduce wind chill by 10 degrees without spending a dime. One guy I talked to specifically scouts locations based on which direction winter storms blow from. He moves his entire setup seasonally like some kind of homeless weatherman. Here's something fascinating about tent cities. They cluster together for a reason. Grouped shelters create windbreaks for each other. The tent in the middle stays warmest while outer tents take the brunt. It's basically penguin huddle strategy for humans. Your tent fly matters too. If it reaches completely to the ground, that dead airspace acts as insulation. Gap at the bottom, wind tunnel. And in snowy areas, people pile snow around tent bases. Sounds crazy, but snow contains trapped air pockets that actually insulate. Speaking of unexpected insulation sources, you won't believe what people pull from dumpsters. Now here's where homeless survival gets creative. And honestly, a little disgusting to think about, but it works. Newspapers. Your grandparents probably stuffed them in wet shoes. Turns out, crumpling newspaper inside your jacket creates air pockets that work almost identically to expensive synthetic insulation. The same principle that keeps your coffee hot in a paper cup keeps your body heat trapped against your skin. I tried this once during a power outage. Felt ridiculous. Stayed warm. Then there's bubble wrap. You know, that stuff you pop when you're bored at work. Dumpsters behind shipping stores are full of it. Lay down a few layers and you've got ground insulation that rivals $40 camping pads. The air trapped in each bubble does the heavy lifting. Plastic sheeting deserves mention too. Sliding a sheet under your tent stops moisture from creeping up through the floor. Ground dampness is sneaky. It'll soak through fabric overnight and steal every bit of warmth you've built up. But my favorite? Styrofoam coolers. Break them into chunks, layer the pieces, and suddenly you're sleeping on legitimate insulation. Fish markets throw these away by the dozen. Free, effective. Slightly embarrassing if anyone asks where you got your mattress. Carpet samples are another goldmine. Flooring stores toss out thick samples constantly. Stack 5 or 6 and you've got insulation that interior designers paid good money for. One homeless man in Chicago survived minus 20-degree nights using nothing but garbage bags stuffed with shredded newspaper. Minus 20. With trash. Makes you realize that survival isn't about expensive gear. It's about understanding what heat needs to stay put. Speaking of staying put, there's one enemy that destroys all this insulation work overnight, and it comes from your own body. Here's the thing nobody tells you about winter tent living. Your biggest enemy isn't the cold outside, it's the water you're creating inside. Every breath you take releases moisture. Every single exhale. You're basically a humidifier with legs. And when that warm breath hits freezing tent walls, instant frost. By morning, your tent looks like the inside of a neglected freezer. Then the sun comes up. That frost melts, drips everywhere. Suddenly, your sleeping bag is damp, and wet insulation loses up to 90% of its warming ability. 90%! You could have the fanciest sleeping bag money can buy, but get it wet, and it's about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. This is why staying dry matters more than staying warm. Sounds backwards, right? Now, here's where it gets counterintuitive. You actually need to crack your tent ventilation open, even in freezing weather. I know, feels wrong, like opening a window during a blizzard. But that small gap lets moisture escape instead of building up on your walls. Some folks get clever about this. They collect silica gel packets from shoe boxes all year long. Those little do not eat packets, they absorb small amounts of moisture overnight. Free dehumidifiers from every pair of sneakers you buy. Experienced outdoor sleepers also keep sleeping bags in waterproof stuffed sacks until the exact moment they climb inside. Not a second earlier. Because ambient tent moisture will sneak into that insulation before you even notice. But here's the silver lining. Morning sun hitting your tent creates a greenhouse effect. Damp gear can dry within hours if you position things right. Of course, managing moisture only works if you're actually generating enough body heat to protect. And that brings us to fuel. Here's where things get interesting. Your body is basically a furnace, but furnaces need fuel. High-fat foods like peanut butter metabolize slowly. We're talking 6 hours of steady heat production from one meal. That's why homeless outreach workers hand out peanut butter crackers like they're going out of style. They're not being cheap, they're being smart. Eating around 500 calories before bed can keep your internal temperature elevated through the coldest hours. My grandfather called this stoking the fire. Turns out he wasn't just being folksy, he was being scientific. Now, here's something that trips people up. Alcohol feels warming, Your face gets flushed. Your chest feels hot. But that's a trap. Alcohol dilates your blood vessels, which actually dumps your core heat into the cold air. It's like opening all your windows during a blizzard because the heater made you sweaty. Terrible strategy. And the weird part is, dehydration might be worse than hunger. When you don't drink enough water, your blood thickens. Thicker blood circulates poorly. Poor circulation means cold extremities. Cold extremities mean frostbite risk shoots through the roof. Some veteran outdoor sleepers keep a thermos of hot soup, not for dinner, for 2 a.m. That's when body temperature naturally bottoms out. A warm drink at that hour acts like hitting a reset button on your internal thermostat. Makes sense, right? The human body burns roughly 70 calories per hour just existing. In cold weather, that number climbs dramatically. Without replacement fuel, you're running on empty exactly when you need a full tank. But eating the right foods only solves half the problem. There's cheap technology originally designed for astronauts that homeless people have turned into survival gear. And it costs about $1. NASA didn't invent this technology for homeless people. They created it to keep astronauts from freezing in space. And now you can buy it at any pharmacy for about $1. That's the weird part. Emergency blankets, those crinkly silver sheets that look like giant candy wrappers, reflect up to 97% of your body's radiated heat right back at you. 97%. Your expensive down jacket wishes it could perform like that. But here's where most people mess up. They just throw the Mylar on top and call it a day. Wrong approach. The real trick is using 2 blankets. One goes underneath your sleeping bag, shiny side facing up. This bounces ground cold away from your body. The second blanket wraps around the outside of your sleeping bag, shiny side facing inward. Now you've got heat reflection working in both directions. I tried this during a camping trip where my summer-rated sleeping bag met an unexpected frost. Felt like sleeping inside a baked potato wrapped in foil. Toasty. There's one major catch, though. Mylar traps everything, including your body's moisture. You'll wake up feeling like you slept inside a plastic bag, which technically you kind of did. The solution is wearing a breathable base layer and keeping one corner slightly open for airflow. Then there's the noise problem. Every time you shift position, it sounds like someone wrestling a grocery bag. Your tent neighbors will love you for this. The workaround is wrapping the Mylar inside your sleeping bag liner where movement is cushioned. Some companies now sell Mylar tents designed for disaster relief. These things can handle temperatures well below zero, but reflective blankets only solve half the equation. Because staying warm means nothing if your fingers and toes are turning black from frostbite. Now here's where things get dangerous. And I mean life or death dangerous. Heating a tent sounds simple, just light something on fire, right? Wrong. Every winter, people die in their tents because they brought the wrong heat source inside. Carbon monoxide is colorless and odorless. You fall asleep warm and never wake up. But safe options do exist. Candle lanterns designed for camping produce small amounts of heat without the deadly gas buildup. They won't turn your tent into a sauna, but they'll take the edge off. Think of them as the space heater's responsible younger sibling. Then there's the terracotta pot trick. You place tea light candles inside a clay flower pot, and the ceramic absorbs heat slowly, then radiates it out for hours. It's basically a tiny wood stove that runs on dollar store candles. I've seen guys use this setup when temperatures dropped into the single digits. Chemical hand warmers work too. Stick a few in a sock, hang it from your tent ceiling, and they'll radiate gentle warmth for 8 hours straight. No flame, no risk, just chemistry doing its thing. Battery-powered heated blankets have gotten surprisingly good lately. Charge them at a library or coffee shop, and you've got portable warmth that doesn't produce any fumes whatsoever. But propane heaters? Those kill people. Seriously, every single winter, headlines pop up about someone who brought a fuel-burning heater into an enclosed space. The tent got warm. The person got sleepy. The carbon monoxide did the rest. If you absolutely must use any flame or fuel source, ventilation isn't optional. Crack that tent open. Cold air beats dead. Speaking of staying alive, protecting your extremities matters more than most people realize. Your body has a survival pecking order. And guess what? Your fingers and toes are at the bottom of the list. When core temperature drops, blood vessels in your extremities constrict. Your heart basically says, "Sorry, hands, but the brain and organs need this heat more than you do." cold fingers aren't just uncomfortable. They're your body throwing non-essential passengers off the lifeboat. Here's something most people get wrong about gloves. Mittens actually work better than gloves in extreme cold. Why? Because your fingers huddle together, sharing warmth like penguins in a blizzard. Individual glove fingers leave each digit fighting the cold alone. It's the difference between a group hug and standing in separate corners. Now for a trick that sounds weird but works brilliantly. Vapor barrier socks. You wear a thin liner sock, then a plastic bag or waterproof layer, then your regular sock. The plastic traps moisture against your skin and creates a tiny humid microclimate. Sounds gross, right? But your feet stay dramatically warmer because no heat escapes through evaporation. Frostbite becomes permanent after roughly 30 minutes at temperatures below 20 degrees. 30 minutes. That's one sitcom episode without commercials. This is why experienced outdoor sleepers tuck their hands between their thighs before sleeping. Those large leg muscles generate serious heat, and your fingers absorb it all night. But here's what surprised me most. Your head and neck can leak up to 40% of your total body heat. 40%. A simple balaclava covering everything except your eyes basically patches almost half your heat loss problem. It's like finding out your house has a window wide open during winter. Speaking of things that seem obvious but aren't, timing matters more than most people realize. Here's the thing about surviving cold nights in a tent. Timing matters more than almost anything else. Your body temperature doesn't stay constant while you sleep. It drops. And the lowest point hits between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. That's when most cold-related emergencies happen. Not at midnight, not at 6 a.m. Right in that danger window when you're deepest in sleep. Smart outdoor sleepers know this. They get into their sleeping bags fully dressed before the shivering even starts. Why? Because once you start shivering, you're already losing the battle. Your body is burning calories just trying to stay warm. Calories you might need later. And speaking of burning energy unnecessarily, ever had to pee at 3 a.m. in freezing weather? It's miserable. Your warm cocoon becomes a distant memory the second you unzip that bag. Experienced homeless folks handle this like my grandfather handled dessert. Get it done before bed, no exceptions. Some people actually set silent alarms for 3 a.m., not to wake up fully, just enough to wiggle their fingers and toes. Check that everything still has feeling. 30 seconds of awareness has saved more extremities than you'd believe. But then comes the good news. When that sun rises, everything changes. Within the first hour of daylight, tent temperatures can climb 30 degrees. The fabric acts like a greenhouse. Suddenly, that death trap becomes a cozy little oven. This is why many homeless individuals time their deepest sleep for dawn hours. They stay semi-alert during the dangerous middle-of-night window, then crash hard once natural warmth arrives. It's counterintuitive. Sleep when the sun's up, but when your survival depends on outsmarting the cold, you learn to work with nature's schedule instead of fighting it.